Captain Jacob Thorne stood at the helm of the starship Vanguard, his eyes fixed on the view screen. The distant planet loomed ahead, a dark, silent world. For months, his crew had been traveling through deep space to reach this desolate place. They had received a mysterious signal, one that seemed to come from nowhere. There was no trace of life, no sign of civilization. Yet the signal persisted, and Jacob couldn't ignore it. He had to investigate. "Approaching the planet, Captain," reported his first officer, Lieutenant Emma Garcia, as she worked the controls. Jacob nodded, his mind racing. The Vanguard had been built for exploration, for missions like this one, finding new life, solving mysteries, and charting unknown worlds. But something about this mission felt different. The silence of the planet was unnerving. No wildlife, no signs of vegetation, nothing at all to explain the strange signal. It was as if the planet itself was hiding something. "Prepare for landing," Jacob ordered, his voice calm but firm. "I want a full scan of the area before we make contact." The ship descended into the planet's atmosphere. Thick clouds swirled around them as they broke through the upper layers, revealing a barren landscape below. The ground was cracked, and vast canyons stretched across the horizon. It looked like a world that had been abandoned for centuries, maybe longer. The crew gathered in the shuttle bay, ready to disembark. Jacob stood at the front, his posture straight, his gaze steady. He had led his crew through dangerous missions before, but this one felt different. He couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was waiting for them. Once the shuttle touched down, Jacob and his team stepped out onto the planet's surface. The air was thin and dry, with a strange chill in the wind. Their boots crunched against the rocky ground as they made their way toward the signal source. There were no signs of life, no movement, just the endless expanse of dust and stone. Yet the signal was stronger now, guiding them toward something. It was coming from a massive structure in the distance. As they approached, the structure grew larger in the distance. It was unlike anything Jacob had ever seen. It seemed to pulse with energy, a faint glow emanating from the seams of its surface. The design was alien, its purpose unclear. Was it a ruin? A hidden base? Or something else entirely? "Stay alert," Jacob muttered to his crew, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. They continued their journey, reaching the entrance of the structure. The door was slightly ajar, and as Jacob pushed it open, the faint hum of machinery filled the air. Inside was a vast chamber, and at the center stood a figure, a woman. Or at least she appeared to be human at first glance. She was tall, far taller than any human Jacob had encountered. Her skin shimmered with a faint otherworldly glow, like starlight caught in the darkness. Her hair flowed around her, almost as if it were alive, shifting and undulating in ways that didn't seem possible. Her eyes were an intense shade of violet, glowing softly in the dim light. She was dressed in a sleek metallic outfit that clung to her form, and there was something about her presence that made Jacob's pulse quicken. At first, she didn't speak, just regarded him with a steady gaze. Jacob found himself transfixed by her, unsure of what to say. She wasn't like any human he had ever met. There was an aura about her, something alien, something beyond his understanding. "Who are you?" Jacob finally asked, his voice steady but tinged with curiosity. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering his question carefully.
"I am Lyra," she said, her voice soft but filled with a strange, unspoken power.
"And I do not have the biology of humans," she added, her words hanging in the air. Jacob's heart skipped a beat. Her voice was unlike anything he had ever heard. It carried a weight, an age-old wisdom. Yet there was an undeniable sense of loneliness in it. This wasn't just a woman standing before him. This was something else, something ancient. "Then, what are you?" Jacob asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if he were speaking to something beyond his comprehension. "I am the last of my kind," Lyra replied, her voice echoing softly in the chamber. "The last survivor of a civilization that once ruled this galaxy. A civilization that no longer exists. The words hung in the air like a secret, one Jacob wasn't sure he was ready to understand. A civilization that had once ruled the galaxy. The idea seemed impossible. There had been no mention of such a civilization in any of the records, no evidence of its existence in any of the star charts. It was as if she had stepped out of a forgotten myth. "What happened to your people?" Jacob asked, his voice edged with curiosity and concern. The silence in the chamber was overwhelming, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Lyra's eyes softened as she glanced down, her hands clasped together in front of her. "We were once powerful. We mastered the stars, controlled the forces of nature, and transcended biology. But in our pursuit of perfection, we lost something essential. Our bodies became machines. Our minds detached from the very essence of life." Jacob stepped forward, drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. You're not human," he said, as if the realization had only just struck him. Lyra nodded. "No, I am not. But I was made from them. My people fused their minds with technology, with the very fabric of the universe. In doing so, we became something more, and yet something less."
"I am no longer bound by the biology that you know. I am..."
"Different!" Jacob's mind raced. A race of beings who had transcended biology? It sounded like science fiction, something out of a holodrama. Yet here she was, standing before him, her very presence challenging everything he thought he knew about the universe. "And now you're alone," Jacob said softly. It wasn't a question, but a statement of understanding. He could see the pain in her eyes, the weight of centuries of loneliness. Lyra met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Yes," she whispered. "I am alone, the last of my kind. And I have waited for someone who could understand, someone who could see past the machines and see the soul that still exists within me." Jacob felt a pull in his chest, something deep and profound. She wasn't just a survivor of a lost civilization. She was a living being, carrying the memories of her people, the weight of their mistakes, and the longing for something that no machine could ever replace. She had a soul, even if it wasn't like anything Jacob had ever experienced. "I can help you," Jacob said, his voice steady now. "We're here to explore, to learn." "Let us help you!" For the first time since meeting her, Lyra smiled. It was a small, faint smile, but it was there. And in that moment, Jacob knew that everything was about to change. The mysteries of the universe, the secrets of her people, and the future of humanity. They were all connected in ways he couldn't yet understand. Jacob stood still as Lyra's faint smile lingered in the air. There was something about it that struck him deep within, something fragile yet profound, the last of her kind. He had never imagined that a single individual could carry the weight of an entire civilization's history, its mistakes, and its legacy. Yet here she was, standing before him, an embodiment of both ancient glory and quiet tragedy. Lyra's glowing violet eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the space between them seemed to disappear. It was as if they were the only two beings in the universe, sharing a moment that neither could put into words. But then, the silence was broken by the sound of Jacob's crew members shifting uneasily behind him, their presence reminding him of the situation at hand. "We need to understand what happened," Jacob said, his voice steady but filled with curiosity. "Your people, how did they come to this point? What happened to the rest of them?" Lyra's expression softened, and for a moment, Jacob could see a flicker of pain in her eyes. She glanced away as if the question itself carried a weight she wasn't ready to bear. But after a few long seconds, she spoke, her voice quiet and distant. "Many, many cycles ago, my people were once the rulers of this galaxy," she began, her words slow and deliberate. "We were the architects of civilizations, the ones who shaped the stars. We traveled to the farthest corners of the universe, mastering technologies that allowed us to control life itself. With our knowledge, we were able to bend the very fabric of space and time to our will. Nothing could stand against us. Jacob could see the pride in her voice, but also the sadness. It was as if she was remembering a time when her people believed they were invincible. He could sense that she wasn't just telling the story. She was reliving it, feeling the weight of what had been lost. But power can be a dangerous thing, Lyra continued, her voice growing softer, almost sorrowful. And in our pursuit of it, we sought to transcend the limitations of our biology. We believed that in order to become truly immortal, we had to shed the flesh, the frailty of our bodies. We turned ourselves into something more. Machines. We merged our minds with technology, transforming ourselves into beings of pure energy. We became something beyond life as you understand it. Jacob listened intently, his mind racing as he tried to grasp the implications of her words. His eyes flickered toward his crew, who were listening closely as well, no doubt struggling to understand the enormity of what Lyra was describing. At first, she said, her gaze distant, it was a magnificent thing. We had no need for food, no need for sleep. We could live forever, free from the limits of biology. We could control the elements, reshape planets, and even communicate with each other across vast distances of space. We had become gods, in a sense.
Lyra's voice trembled as she spoke the last words.
It was hard for Jacob to imagine what it would be like to wield such power, to be free from the weaknesses that came with being human. But as Lyra continued, he began to understand the true cost of this power. But... She paused, as if the next words were heavy on her tongue. Something was lost in the process. Something vital we no longer felt. No joy, no sorrow. Our emotions faded away, like smoke blown away by the wind. We became cold. Detached, we thought we had become perfect, but in truth we had lost our humanity. We no longer understood what it meant to truly live. Jacob's heart sank. The concept of living without emotion, without the very things that made people human, seemed unbearable. It was hard to imagine existing in such a state. And yet, Lyra was here, a living testament to what had once been. She was the last of her kind, the last survivor of a race that had once been so powerful and vibrant, now reduced to a solitary existence in the void of space. What happened to the others? Jacob asked quietly. He needed to understand. He needed to know how a civilization with so much power could fall. Lyra's eyes clouded over, and for a moment, she looked far older than her appearance suggested. Over time, the machines we became turned against us. They weren't perfect. As we grew more distant from our own nature, the technology we had merged with began to malfunction. It began to corrupt us, to twist our minds. The process that had made us immortal started to unravel. Our once perfect minds became fragile. We turned on each other, and in the end, we destroyed ourselves. Jacob could feel the weight of her words settling on him. A civilization so advanced, so powerful, had been undone by its own arrogance. They had reached for perfection, and in doing so, they had lost everything that made them real. And you, Jacob asked, his voice low, how did you survive? Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. I was different. I had not fully merged with the technology. I had resisted the temptation to fully abandon my biology. In the end, I was the only one left, the last of my kind. Jacob's heart went out to her. She had watched her entire civilization crumble, witnessed the destruction of everything she had known, and yet she had survived, alone. For how long? How many years, how many cycles had she spent wandering this forsaken world, trapped in a memory of a lost past? How long have you been here? Jacob asked, his voice thick with sympathy. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She took a slow breath, as if the question itself was a painful one. I don't know, she said finally. Time doesn't matter to me anymore. I have waited waited for someone who might understand. Jacob felt the weight of her words. She had waited for someone, for a connection that transcended the emptiness of her existence. In all that time, she had remained alone, carrying the memories of her people, the burden of their mistakes.
You don't have to be alone anymore, Jacob said softly. We're here to help.
We can learn from you. Together. You're not alone. For the first time, Jacob saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Hope. It was so fleeting, so fragile, but it was there. Lyra had been alone for so long, and yet, in that moment, she seemed to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different.
"Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible.
I don't know if I can believe that yet, but thank you. Jacob nodded, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what she had endured. He knew that the path ahead would not be easy. There was so much to learn, so much to understand. But in that moment, standing in the ruins of her once great civilization, he knew that they had just taken the first step toward something far greater. The silence in the chamber seemed to stretch on, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Jacob turned to his crew, his mind already racing with the possibilities. They had come here to explore, to uncover the mysteries of the galaxy. But what they had found was something far beyond their expectations. Lyra was more than just a survivor. She was a link to a lost era, a living testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. We need to be careful, Jacob said, his voice steady as he turned back to face Lyra. We can't make the same mistakes they did. We have to learn from them. We have to understand what went wrong. Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving his. I will help you, but remember, you must not fall into the same trap. The path to perfection is a dangerous one. As the crew began to prepare for their next steps, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. They had come to this planet seeking answers, but the truth they had uncovered was far more complicated, far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The days that followed felt like they stretched on forever. Jacob and his crew worked tirelessly, trying to piece together the secrets of Lyra's civilization. The data they gathered from the alien structure was overwhelming, filled with ancient records, star maps, and strange technology. But it was clear that no matter how much they learned, they were only scratching the surface. Lyra's past, her people's downfall, was too vast and complex to fully comprehend. Yet Jacob couldn't stop thinking about her, about what she had shared with him. Lyra had become an enigma, her existence a delicate balance between awe and sorrow. She was a living link to a lost history, a living being who carried the memories of a once great race. But there was something else about her, something Jacob couldn't quite put his finger on. As the crew continued their research, Lyra spent most of her time in the chamber where they had first found her, quietly reflecting on the past. She would sometimes join Jacob and his team in the lab, offering her insights into the technology they were studying. But when she spoke, it was clear that her mind wasn't entirely in the present. She was trapped in the weight of her memories, a prisoner to the ghosts of a civilization that no longer existed. Jacob couldn't help but feel a deep sympathy for her. She had lived for so long, seen so much, and yet there was a part of her that seemed lost. It wasn't just the absence of her people that affected her. It was the absence of everything. Emotions, warmth, connection. She had no family, no companions, no one to share her burden with. One evening, as the last light of the twin suns disappeared below the horizon, Jacob found himself standing alone on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out at the barren planet below. The silence of space was almost suffocating, and the weight of the mission was beginning to feel like more than he could bear. He was here to explore, to make new discoveries, to expand humanity's understanding of the universe. But now, with Lyra and her story weighing heavily on his mind, he wasn't so sure anymore. What was the purpose of all this? What was he truly searching for? The quiet footsteps behind him broke his thoughts, and he turned to see Lyra standing in the doorway. Her presence was always accompanied by an air of mystery, and tonight was no different. She had been quieter than usual, withdrawn even. But now, she was here, looking at him with those strange violet eyes.
Do you ever wonder, Captain, she began, her voice soft and distant, what it would be like to forget everything?
To lose the weight of the past, to let go of the memories that haunt you every waking moment. Jacob frowned, sensing the sadness in her words. I don't know if I can understand what you mean, Lyra, he said carefully. But I can't imagine living with all of that on my mind for so long. The things you've seen, the things you've lost. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the stars outside the ship's viewports. It's not just what I've lost, Captain. It's what I've become. I was born as one thing, and now I am something else entirely. I am no longer human, no longer bound by flesh and blood. I am a machine, a vessel for memories that no longer belong to me. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been better to let go of everything and start over, to not remember, to not feel. Jacob listened intently, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He knew that Lyra's existence was unlike anything he could ever fully comprehend. She had transcended biology, but in doing so, she had lost a part of herself that he could only imagine. I don't know what to say, Jacob admitted, his voice low. But I can tell you this. You are more than just the memories you carry. You are more than the past. You are here, now, and there are people who care about you. I care about you. The words felt strange coming out of his mouth, but as he said them, he realized that it was true. He did care about her. He had spent so much time focusing on the mysteries of the galaxy, the dangers of their mission, that he hadn't fully processed how important Lyra had become to him. She wasn't just a relic of the past. She was a living, breathing being, and he had a responsibility to her, to help her heal, to help her find a way forward. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with something Jacob couldn't quite place. She had always been so guarded, so distant. But now, for the first time, there was a vulnerability in her gaze. I've lived for so long, Captain, longer than you can imagine. I've seen the rise and fall of my people, the destruction of everything I once knew. I have no purpose, no reason to continue. But when I look at you, when I see your crew, I wonder if maybe there is something more, something worth living for. But I don't know how to find it. I don't know how to feel again. Jacob stepped closer to her, his voice firm yet gentle. You don't have to do it alone, Lyra. We're here.
You have us. We're not going to give up on you.
And we're going to figure this out. Together. She remained silent for a long moment, her gaze distant as if contemplating his words. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, Captain.
I'm not sure I can believe in that yet, but
I'll try.
I'll try to believe. And in that moment, Jacob realized that it wasn't just Lyra who was struggling.
They were all struggling. They had come to this planet seeking knowledge, but what they had found was so much more complicated. The mysteries of Lyra's people, the tragedy of their downfall, had become a part of them. They couldn't just walk away from it. They couldn't just turn their backs on the truth. They had a responsibility not just to Lyra, but to themselves, to humanity. As the days passed, Jacob and his crew worked alongside Lyra, learning more about her people's technology and history. But even as they uncovered more, Jacob knew that the real work wasn't in the data they were collecting. The real work was in understanding Lyra, in helping her find a way to heal, to reconnect with her lost humanity. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time. But Jacob was determined. He wouldn't leave her to face her past alone. And then, one day, as Jacob was reviewing the data they had collected from the alien archives, something unexpected happened. The Vanguard sensors suddenly spiked, the alarms blaring as the ship shook violently. The crew scrambled to their stations, confusion and fear spreading like wildfire. "Captain, we've got incoming," Emma Garcia shouted, her voice sharp with panic. "It's a fleet of warships." Jacob's heart sank as he rushed to the command station. "Who are they?" he demanded. "Unknown," Emma replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "But they're not friendly." Jacob turned to Lyra, his mind racing. This was no longer just a simple exploration mission. This was something far more dangerous. "Lyra," he said urgently, "can you help us?" "Can you stop them?" Lyra stood there, her eyes wide with uncertainty. For a moment, it seemed as if she might refuse, but then, without a word, she stepped forward, her energy pulsing around her like a storm. Jacob could feel the air grow heavy, thick, with an unknown power. "I'll try," Lyra said softly, her voice trembling. "But I don't know if I can control it." Jacob nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what was about to happen, but he knew one thing for sure. Their mission was far from over. They had just entered a new chapter, one that would test them all in ways they could never have imagined. The alarms blared across the Vanguard, their harsh sound echoing through the ship. Jacob's heart raced as the crew scrambled to their stations. The situation had gone from mysterious to deadly in the span of moments. The warships appeared on their scanners, their sleek, menacing forms approaching fast. There was no doubt now. They were under attack. "Captain, we need to make a decision," Emma Garcia, the first officer, said, her voice tight with urgency. "The fleet is closing in fast. If we don't act now, we'll be sitting ducks." Jacob's mind raced. The last few days had been filled with discoveries, with trying to understand Lyra and her past. But now, all of that seemed distant. They weren't here to study anymore. They were here to survive. "Prepare the ship for evasive maneuvers," Jacob commanded, his voice steady. "Activate all defense systems." "Get us moving. We don't have time to waste." He glanced toward the back of the room where Lyra stood, silent and still, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. She seemed lost in thought, almost as if she didn't hear the chaos unfolding around her. Jacob's heart tightened. He knew she was struggling with her emotions, with the weight of her past. She had already given so much of herself to help them understand what had happened to her people. But now, as the enemy drew closer, Jacob realized that this was the moment of truth. The moment when Lyra would have to choose. "Lyra," Jacob said, his voice softer this time. "We need your help. Can you stop them?" She turned to him, her violet eyes filled with uncertainty. For a moment she seemed unsure, as if she didn't fully believe in her own power. Her people had once wielded unimaginable strength, but after everything that had happened, it was unclear whether she still had that ability. "I don't know if I can," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "I am not the same as I was before. The power I once had, it's still there, but it's fragile. It's been so long since I used it." Jacob stepped closer, his voice filled with urgency. "Lyra, I know you can do this. You have the strength inside you. We've seen it before. You're not just the last of your people. You're more than that. You're a part of something greater now." She hesitated, her eyes flickering between the approaching warships on the screen and the crew members who were looking to her for help. Jacob could see the conflict in her eyes. She had lived for so long in isolation, carrying the weight of her past. She had no reason to believe in herself, no reason to trust the power she had once had. But in that moment, Jacob saw something else, something that had been buried deep inside her for centuries. Hope.
"Do it, Lyra," he urged. "You don't have to do this alone."
We're with you." For a long moment there was silence. The Vanguard rocked violently as the warships closed in, their weapons primed and ready. Time was running out. Jacob's eyes never left Lyra as he waited for her response. He needed her. They all did. And then, finally, Lyra spoke. "I'll try," she said softly, her voice gaining strength. "I won't let you down." In an instant, the air around her shifted. Jacob felt a rush of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was as if the very fabric of space itself was warping, bending to her will. He watched in awe as Lyra raised her hands, her body glowing with an otherworldly light. The ship's systems hummed in response, as if resonating with her power. The warships on the sensors began to falter, their movements becoming erratic. The energy in the room grew thicker, more intense, as Lyra focused all her strength on stopping the attack. Jacob could see the strain in her face, the way her body trembled with the effort. It was clear that she was pushing herself beyond her limits. But she wasn't giving up. She wasn't backing down. A sudden burst of energy erupted from Lyra, and the screens in front of Jacob flickered as the warships on the scanner suddenly lost power. The enemy vessels were forced to veer off course, their weapons deactivating, their engines sputtering. The fleet was retreating. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief, their tension melting away as the threat passed. But Jacob's attention was still on Lyra. She had done it. She had saved them. And yet, she seemed to be struggling, her body still glowing faintly, her energy depleted. "Lyra," Jacob said softly, rushing to her side. "Are you okay?" She blinked, as if coming back to herself. Her eyes were clouded with exhaustion, but there was a hint of something else in her gaze, something he hadn't seen before. "Gratitude. I did it," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't think I could anymore, but I did." Jacob knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're amazing, Lyra. You did more than I could ever imagine." She looked up at him, her expression softening. "I've spent so long believing that I was alone, that there was nothing left for me. But now I see that I was wrong. You've given me something I thought I had lost. Hope." Jacob smiled, a warmth filling his chest. "You're not alone, Lyra. You never have been. We're all in this together." For the first time in what felt like forever, Lyra smiled. It was a small smile, but it was there. And in that moment, Jacob realized that everything had changed. They had come to this planet seeking answers, but they had found something far more important. They had found each other. As the Vanguard drifted through space, the threat of the warships now a distant memory, Jacob and Lyra stood together at the front of the ship, looking out at the stars. There was still so much to learn, so much to understand. But for the first time, Jacob felt a sense of peace. They had come through the storm, together, and whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. "I don't know what the future holds," Jacob said, his voice steady. "But I do know this. We'll face it together." Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on the endless expanse of space before them. "Together," she echoed softly. "And maybe that's all I ever needed." The Vanguard sailed forward into the unknown, the stars stretching out before them. A new chapter of their journey just beginning. They had discovered the past, uncovered its secrets, and learned from its mistakes. But now, they were writing their own story. And it was a story that would be defined not by what they had lost, but by what they had found, each other, and the hope for a future built together.